This is a Renew original recording. Hello and welcome to the Believe in People podcast. My name is Matthew Butler and I'm your host, or as I like to say, your facilitator. Today I speak with Claira Hermet and we discuss a range of topics from social anxiety to nights out when sober. We'll be exploring eating disorders, confront the trend of misogyny grifting, and navigate panic attacks, labels, and the OnlyFans culture.
So first of all, thank you for coming on the Believe in People podcast. Can you please introduce yourself?
My name's Claira Hermet. I am a presenter, content creator, and self-love and confidence coach.
I love that.
Yeah.
Self-love and confidence. Well, I've got topics that I want to talk about today. So we've got sobriety, overcoming social anxiety, rejecting unrealistic narratives. But the one that I am really interested in is that combination of overcoming social anxiety and sobriety.
Yeah.
I think I've never spoke about social anxiety with people before, but it's a topic that is quite prevalent in my life. So I've never really met anybody else with it other than, my wife has it pretty bad, and coupled with the sobriety element with it, because I guess them two go hand in hand. Often with social anxiety, you need to have a little bit of a drink before you do something social in order to relax. So let's talk about those two things first and a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So it's funny because the reason that I'm on the podcast is Robbie, who's your producer, heard me talking at a Radio Academy event, and I was talking about how I got into presenting, and the story basically all is based around a glass of wine, or quite a lot of wine. And that's the reason that I got into presenting, essentially, because I was so shy. And I guess I would call it shy at that time, but now it would be social anxiety. And I think that I just didn't realise, I didn't even know what anxiety was. I'm 40 now. So, if we're talking about when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, I just thought I was really shy. And I struggled to make conversation with people. I just felt like all of my muscle, when I was in social situations, my muscles, I wouldn't know the right, moves to make or how to have a conversation. I used to struggle to make phone calls. It was all just really difficult for me, unless I'd had a drink. And then if I had a drink, I then kind of, shed that shell and just relaxed and could be the version of myself that I felt like I was, if that made sense, or that I was maybe if I was with close friends or family. And so I think that alcohol in that sense really became a crutch. And even the first TV show that I did, I drank a couple of glasses of wine before I did it, because I don't think I would have been able to do it otherwise in the way that I did. And then I started interviewing people, and the same thing. Like sometimes I would have a drink beforehand, just so that I could, feel like myself, which sounds really wild to say that. And it's something that then I think you just get used to doing and you become reliant on, because it just pushes that feeling down, and you get into that space of comfortability. And so I haven't had a drink now for like over 2 months, and it was just, I decided that I was gonna go sober and not have refined sugar until Christmas Day. And I've actually been out quite a lot, and in social situations. I've been to a club, I've been to different places, and I'm really enjoying it, because I feel like I'm now a different version of myself. I'm not the same person that I was 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting because I teach alcohol awareness training, and part of one of the modules that we do is we talk about reasons for drinking, and we have experimental, recreational, and dependence. And when we talk about dependence, people often instantly think about alcohol dependence, waking up, having a 10 supers in the morning, having a vodka, having a wine, whatever it is, in order to function. But talking about dependence it actually transcends that. And for me, this is where the social anxiety comes in. I could argue that what you was going through was dependent drinking, because you couldn't socialise or function without having a drink beforehand. You couldn't do the things. It's basically, dependence just means you need to have a drink in order to do what you want to do. And it could be simple things like making phone calls and things like that. But the interesting thing about this now is now you're an influencer. So that social anxiety that you have is, I guess, you've had to push that to a side in order to put so much of your life out there for people to see.
Yeah, I think it's really dissipated as I've got older. Like it's something about a comfortability within myself, I guess, that just allows me to be like, right, this is me, and it's okay. And I think it's like that kind of giving myself that reassurance that allows me to kind of take up space, that allows me to feel reassured, that allows me to trust myself in those situations. And, you know, I've had to practice, like it's taken me years. And, you know, whenever I talk to people about kind of the fact that I was really shy and then, you know, people might have seen some of my content, they're like, how did you get from there to there? Yeah. And I have done, I think pretty much most of the stuff that I did for about 10 years just scared the shit out of me. Like, and I felt so uncomfortable and so, it was just horrible, but I wanted to do it because I knew that the payoff was going to be, you know, great. If it was making video content, you know, I did hidden camera stuff. I did all kinds of things and I'd feel like sick with anxiety before doing it. But I just knew that the only way to get to the other side was to get through it. And for a long time, that's how every single thing that I did felt. And the payoff is now it doesn't feel like that. You know, I can sit and have a conversation with you. Like I host my own podcast with my friends. And I noticed that my radio show, whatever guests I have now, I can reassure myself that I have the ability to be able to, you know, host and hold a conversation with them. And that is real growth for me, I think. But I do think it comes from identifying like what's going on. Like I said to you, I didn't know that was social anxiety. I just thought it was shy. My mum was shy, my brother's shy, I'm just shy. You know, I didn't try and pick it apart or look at like my limiting beliefs and, you know, what was actually happening at that point. So I think once I started to do that and really like work on myself, some of it started to kind of fall away. But again, I think that unless you're willing to get outside of your comfort zone and do things whilst feeling the social anxiety and do things whilst feeling the fear, you can't reassure yourself that you're going to be okay.
What does practicing it look like then? Because obviously, I mean, it's not something that's just come with age. You haven't just, you know, turned 40 and now it's all gone sort of thing. What does practicing look like when overcoming something? Because as someone who struggles with anxiety myself, I'm finding it very hard to get past it. And it's a process.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to be doing in that process. I'm just trying different things and hoping it works. So for you, in terms of overcoming social anxiety, what is the practicing element of that looking like? Like, what was that process, I guess, in self-love and in increasing confidence as well?
Yeah, I've had loads of therapy.
Yeah.
At different points in my life. I think when I was kind of a teenager, I had really bad bulimia. And I remember my dad just giving me a leaflet for a therapist and being like, you need to go here. And that was it. And I went and she was not a good therapist. You know, looking back and reflecting now, what makes a good therapist, she just wanted to talk about her anorexic daughter, which wasn't great for me. And so I that put me off therapy for ages. And when I actually sought therapy for myself at different points in my life, which is, you know, something that I'll do even now, it's like, oh shit, I need to work on this if something comes up or it's there. And I'll go and do that. I think it looks like I went traveling for 10 months on my own. Like I was at 32, I quit my jobs in London and I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to go. Because there was this little voice in my head that was like, go traveling. And I thought, that's bonkers. I've never wanted to go traveling. I don't want to put a backpack on my back. I like staying in nice hotels and going on a nice holiday. And I just, in the end, I was like, right, we're just going to go. And I was so scared. And I do think it is that. It's like, it is understanding what is kind of maybe triggering the anxiety, or what is the fear that is beneath and underneath the anxiety. Like, what is it? What is the fear that's there? No matter how big or small it is, it comes from somewhere. I feel like there's a source, or there's a trigger, or there's a something, for it. And understanding that can be really helpful, because then when you're in that scenario where the anxiety is triggered, you can, kind of coach yourself out of it. There's so many, funnily enough, when I feel anxious, I always tap my collarbone. Okay. So there's EFT, which is like emotional freedom technique. So it's like a series of tapping on your meridians, like your energy centers. And I used to get anxiety really badly when I was driving. And so to bring myself back into my body, I would do this, breathe, and actually talk to myself and just reassure myself, like, I'm going to be okay. And I know in social situations, if you start doing this and talking to yourself, it's probably not going to be the greatest thing. But I do think it is about when you're away from that situation and you're able to reflect on it, like, what is it? If we're grown-ups now, like, why do we feel so uncomfortable in that situation? What is triggering that for us? And I can't remember what the girl's name is. She was on the Bake Off, and she was on my radio show, and she said she had really bad social anxiety. And when she was in uni, she was just like, this is going to ruin my life. So she just started talking to people, and she just started and she would do it over and over again. She's like, I might have been really weird and said the craziest stuff, but it's how I got myself out of it. And I think that's what I've done as well. And when I say practicing, I would go to supermarkets and have a conversation with the person at the checkout, force myself into conversations with different people, because I wanted to learn how to have communication and make it comfortable. If I was going to do like a screen test or I had a meeting, on my journey there, either I would take some things that had happened to me on the journey that could be conversation starters, or I'd think of 2 or 3 questions that I could use to get me into the conversation, because then that would dissipate things for me and make me feel better. I also find that vocalising, I feel anxious to people around me, really helps. So when I first started doing the radio show for BBC Radio London, I had really bad anxiety. And I would be on air, and I'd ask someone a question, and while they were answering me, I would think, my mind's blank. What am I going to ask them next? What am I going to ask them next? And I'd feel it like coming up. And I'd got as if I was going to have a panic attack. And what I started to do is verbalise to my producer before we started the show that I was feeling like that. And then I'd do it on air. So I'd build it into the conversation, where it would be like, coming back into doing radio again. Like, I've found myself experiencing anxiety. Like, I get it when I'm on air. What about you? Like, how do you deal with stressful situations? So just even saying it out loud. So I think there's lots of different ways, but I feel like for me, I guess the social anxiety was always there. The panic attacks and stuff started after my sister got ill. So my mum died of breast cancer when I was 9, and my sister got breast cancer at 25 and died at 31. So when my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, I think that just like snapped something in me, where it was just the fear of losing her as well. So I think that they're 2 different experiences as well. So that social anxiety versus, like anxiety and panic attacks. I've had the lot, mate.
Do you know what? The strangest thing with all that is, before you even mentioned it then, I don't know why this is how I'm feeling right now. I could just feel my body. Right now, I'm sat here and I can feel my body getting hot. Yeah. And I'm starting to feel like something's coming up. I've never had this when I'm doing a podcast. And it's not because I'm doing the podcast. I can just feel these different elements of anxiety coming on. And I think it's just because we're talking about it. Yeah. And I'm like, just before you said that, I was like, I'm going to have to duck out this room. I'm gonna have to leave. But I can. What you were saying then with the radio presenters, and I guess it's not fear of like holding a conversation. I don't even know what's bringing it on. So when you were saying then that you've got to, look at what causes anxiety and look at what causes those triggers. For me, still, I have no idea.
Have you always been socially anxious?
I mean, it's not even so much socially anxious. It's just a general anxiety that can come on out of nowhere. And I think I catastrophize every single situation. So travel is one of them things for me. So yesterday, I woke up, I looked outside, it was snowing. And I was like, oh, that's it. The trains are going to be cancelled. They're going to be delayed. I'm going to be stuck at the train station. Yeah. This is going to be awful. And then Robbie had texted me saying, trains are all okay, everything's all right. I thought, no worries. So we get to the train station, 20-minute delay. And I found that once I'm in those moments, I'm not too bad.
But it might be because, again, like as someone who experiences anxiety and we're talking about it, even that, I suppose, could, you could start, am I feeling that? Am I not feeling that? And that questioning in and of itself is kind of like, it can be anxiety.
But I instantly felt better when you said, I'll tell my producers, I'll make it part of the conversation. Because I was like, I can do that. I can make this part of the conversation now because there's a solution. And again, now I've shared a bit of my experiences, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. Yeah. So the counsel I'm doing at the moment, I don't know if you've experienced this yourself, but I often find that when I'm not experiencing anxiety and trying to talk about it with someone, it just doesn't seem important. It just doesn't. It's almost like you downplay it and your anxiety feels daft. But when you're in that moment of a panic attack, it's real. It's terrifying. It's scary.
I don't think it's daft at all. No. I think it's it's very real. But I think it's with therapy. I think you have to be kind of willing to like look at that part of you that experiences anxiety, or look at that part of you that's in pain. Like, for example, I've had this conversation with my brother so many times because my mum died when we were kids and there was never any space for us to grieve or to deal with it. We kind of had repressed a lot of that and it would just rear its head whenever. And so I would go to therapy and be like, I could really articulate it and, talk about it and explain it all. But essentially, that's the part of me that doesn't need help. It's kind of like that repressed emotion that needed help. So I had to be willing to, you know, bring that part of me to therapy. Or when I'm in that moment, you know, like journaling or doing whatever, you know, I can in that moment to try and work out like what are these thoughts, because it can be so overwhelming. I mean, I think essentially there's a book that someone, it's funny because when I started at BBC, I had a presenter coach just for like a couple of sessions, and I was telling her about being anxious on air, and she told me about this book that's an acronym. So it's DARE, so DARE. And I brought the book and I never read it because I started to feel better just by buying the book. But she told me how brilliant it was. And one of the things that she said to me as well is like, when we have anxiety, we always try and fight it. So we get into a battle with it. And she's like, what happens if you just let it come? Like, what happens if you just let it be there and you just let it, you know, what happens? Then what happens? And I found that really interesting, a really interesting concept. And I've definitely, when I'm in a kind of space where I'm like, I can do that in this moment, in this space, I've definitely done that sometimes. And I think that can be like quite helpful. But I guess I used to get, the panic attacks for me would happen when I was driving and when I was live on air, when I was doing TV. So I'd just stop talking and I'd have people in my ear like, are you okay? Because I felt like I was going to die or I was going to collapse or something was going to happen. At that point, I was in my like mid-20s. It got so bad that I was at my dad's and I'd convinced myself there would be nothing wrong with me. It couldn't be mental health. It couldn't be that. It had to be something physical. And I remember being on my dad's computer and looking up the symptoms of brain tumours.
Oh, well.
Coming back upstairs and sitting with my dad in the lounge, and then I was like, I can't feel my legs, and having a massive panic attack and calling an ambulance and being taken to A&E because I was convinced I was dying and something was really wrong with me. And then I went and paid to have a brain scan, an MRI, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with your brain. At which point I had to concede and say, shit, it's a panic attack, to the point that I took myself to hospital because I really believed that, you know. So I think that these things definitely happen. I mean, it sounds like you're doing all of the right stuff. You're doing therapy, you're doing all of those things. But I do think it's like, you know, I don't know for you when it started or like, you know, but I can pinpoint like when anxiety started for me and what that tipping point was, where I guess it was just too, like, emotionally too much. And I think that as you start to maybe like learn how to kind of deal with like any traumas or things that have happened in the past, and you start to process those, as that load lightens, I think it does just get easier. What I will say is I really think you can change your thought processes, and the way to do that is to like become really self-aware. Like, it sounds like you're quite self-aware anyway of what's happening with your thoughts, but rather than just allowing them, like I've had to be like, no, stop, we're not doing that. No, stop, we're not doing it, and just bring myself back every time to like, what is the actual reality? Like, what's the actual reality? And that, you know, we go to like the worst case scenario, and that's what's kind of bringing the anxiety. So sometimes it's like, no, let's bring it back to like reality and getting grounded in the moment and being present, because it's a made up future. It doesn't exist. It's not real. And so I think we have to realise as well about anxiety that actually it's just trying to keep us safe. Like that's all it's trying to do, is just, you know, it's there for a reason. It has a function. And I think even hearing you like talk about your kind of childhood and experiencing anxiety like as a teenager, imagine if you got the right help then. Like imagine if you'd had the advice and, you know, therapy that you're getting now as a child, you'd probably have, you know, really different mechanisms, because also things become, you know, habitual and things become ingrained, right? And so it's like, well, no, I've got to correct it and I've got to put it right, and that's all you're doing. But maybe that's your lesson. And maybe that's what makes you so great at what you do, because you can talk from a real genuine place of experiencing stuff, and that makes you authentic, and that makes people listen to you. And without that experience, you wouldn't be able to do it, and you wouldn't be you. So in a way, you then have to be like, okay, anxiety, cool, thank you. You know, and sometimes even, you know, I'll do that with stuff. It's like, look, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I know you're only here to keep me safe, but I've got this.
I like that. Better than my therapist. I think I've done like 3 sessions now, and it's been about 3 hours, and we've done better. And like in the last 30 seconds, that knowledge was probably better than anything that's been said to me so far. We've talked a little bit about obviously social anxiety, but let's talk more about the sobriety element of it as well. So, recently been sober for 2 months. You said last night that you went out for a few drinks. Well, you didn't go out for a few drinks. You went out with friends until like 3 o'clock in the morning. How do you find being in those environments sober?
I'm enjoying it. I'm
Yeah.
going to be honest. Yeah. And I think also that it's like my body picks up on other people's energy, like the good part of it. So I kind of feel a little bit silly and playful just because I'm in that space and in that energy. And I do think because I feel way more confident. Like I used to need a drink to be able to dance. I used to need a drink to be able to talk to people. Whereas now it's just like, oh no, I can talk to people. I can dance. I can have a good time. The only thing I will say is my feet really hurt.
Yeah, because you don't notice it when you've had a drink, do you? Yeah.
So I like the shoes that I wore last night. I was like, these are so comfortable, and they were fine for the first 4 hours, and then I was like, oh my god, there's no alcohol to take the edge off. But other than that, it's been like it's it's nice, and watching other people. I think you're more aware of everything. Like you're way more aware of everything. So when there's kind of like danger, I guess as well, or people are getting more aggressive with alcohol and stuff, you definitely notice that. But for the most part, it's been that kind of fun and playful side of things. It's quite, it's nice to watch people if they're, they're having a good time and being sensible within reason, I guess. But I've enjoyed it, I think, more than when I'm drinking, because I wake up without hangover.
Yeah.
It doesn't, when I have hangovers now as well, as I've got older, I get real bad anxiety, like horrible anxiety that lasts for days. I just feel crappy, and it just takes so long to recover that I'm just like, I don't want to do that to myself anymore. And this was only supposed to be until Christmas, and I know that my dad and his partner are big drinkers, and they're really expecting me to drink on Christmas Day. But honestly, I don't know if I will.
No.
Because I don't think I need to.
No, I mean, it's one of the things where my daughter's nearly 2, and since having her, I've barely drank anything over the last 2 years. But I don't like putting a label on it, like committing to saying, right, I'm going to be sober now, because once I've put a label on something, I'll want to do
Trapped.
it even. Exactly, I'm trapped. But I'll want to do it even more as well. So dry January, I've probably I had a beer last night with my meal. First beer I've had in months, sort of thing. I didn't even think about it. I just saw it there. I was like, yeah, I'll have one. But if I put a label on it, such as when people do dry January, I'd feel like, I really want to have a drink now, because I'm committing to trying to do, but I've probably went September, October, November, and actually no, we've only just started in December, haven't we? But still, I've got all that time without a drink. Yeah. So do you find that there's more pressure to it now? You're labelling it as something, as sobriety or anything like that?
I don't know. It's. I think with me, I just decide that I'm going to do something, and then I do it. I mean, I wish I could be like this in all areas of my life, because I think the area that I lack kind of consistency is like my work life.
Yeah.
But I think I'm like, no, I think it's because I want to prove to myself that I can.
Yeah.
And so when I've made the decision that I want to prove to myself that I can, then that's it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah.
And it becomes like, this is Project Me, and this is what I've decided I'm going to do. So I'm there. And I think, like, I guess it's weird, isn't it? Because I've been drinking since I was 15, maybe a bit younger.
Yeah.
And, going clubbing since I was 15. And the two things go part and parcel. And it's almost like, especially in this country, like when you're British, it's like
it's cultural, isn't it?
It's like cultural. It's something that we do, the binge drinking, the going out, the getting drunk. And I'm not going to lie, I've enjoyed all of it. I've had a great time, doing it. But, people don't love and like me when I don't drink, then they're not my people,
Exactly,
and I just don't think I want to do it to myself anymore. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit like you. I'm not saying I'm never drinking again. At this point, but this is exactly what I did when I became vegan as well. I was like,
that's what I was going to ask you about the veganism, because again, like, I'm currently, trying to cut little bits of meat out my diary, even though I keep saying diary. I've done that twice. I keep trying to cut meat out my diet when I can. But it's if I put it into if I'd label it and said, right, I'm vegetarian.
Yeah.
I'd find it just really difficult.
Just don't do it though.
Exactly.
You don't have to give yourself a
label.
No,
exactly. I think that and that's where so many of so much of what we do comes in, because for us, we work in drug and alcohol treatment. So for a lot of people that come into services with alcohol dependency, the rule is you can't drink again, because your mind is just not wired in a way where you can detox from alcohol dependency and go out and just have one drink. There's no such thing as just having one drink, because it's often related to the reasons for the drink in terms of trauma. And an example being, I worked with a lad, heroin addict for years, got himself clean, doing really well. And then he said to me, he said, I'm still drinking. I was like, okay, that's fine. Drinking was never your problem. But drinking quickly became his problem because the reason for drinking or the reason for using his substances was in the same way that, smoking or injecting himself with heroin felt like a little bit of a warm hug. He's now getting that warm hug feeling from alcohol. Next thing we knew, a few months down the line, we're treating him for alcohol dependence as well. So it's often the trauma beforehand and the reasons for use where we have to say, look, it's complete absence for you. That's the only thing that's going to work. But again, it's never our decision to say that to someone. We have to help them come to that conclusion themselves. I think that's where people get a little bit confused about what we do. Reality, we're a harm reduction service. If you're going to use drugs, here's how you do it safely. You're going to drink, here's how you keep yourself safe.
I guess it's maybe the word addict, it's like identification with it. It's like, okay, that's why, like that, it's kind of, it gives them a reason for why maybe they feel like that. And I think if I'm really honest, like my addiction, probably has definitely been food. Like I've had so many, issues with food. And I think that started like when my mum died as well. It became my source of comfort, like overeating, eating kind of, like sugary foods, all of that kind of stuff.
I bet that's partly down to the age you was at though. At 9 years old, you're not going to be on the drink, sort of thing. So
And
the only thing you can really indulge on is sweets and sugar.
And then that got progressively, worse and worse. And I think that's where the, bulimia came from and the lack of control that I had as well. I think with eating disorders, it's about, being able to, you're especially if you're still in your childhood, you're not making decisions, everything's out of control and you want to feel like you've got some kind of control. And it just manifested in that way. But again, even with, like the veganism, it was really interesting to me that I could do that, because as much as I'd say that I, stopped regularly making myself sick when I was 25. So I was doing that from 15 to 25, like all the time, to a point where when I was kind of in my late teens, sometimes I was spending, £100 a day on food to eat and throw up. So it was like, when I look at it, I'm just like, oh, it was like a drug addiction. It was so expensive. That's what I was doing. Like, and if I'd done that, if I'd binged that day, I wouldn't go out. If I had plans, I'd cancel everything. It really impacted and affected my life. And then once I managed to get rid of the making myself sick bit, there was still the binge bit.
And how old was you during these sort of periods of? So
I think that when I was spending loads of money, that was kind of like my late teens, early 20s, really, that kind of time where it was really bad. And then, I would every day I'd wake up and be like, I'm not going to do it today. I'm not. And it was like, I didn't have any control. It just took over me and I'd be back in that place again. And I was stuck in that cycle and it was horrible. And I felt what had started as, making me feel in control, I felt completely out of control of. And, eventually I managed to kind of get a grip on it. And I did have a therapy that I went and found. And I did. There's my favourite place in the world is a Caribbean island called St. Vincent. It's St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I went there with my friend for the first time when I was 23. And when I was there for 2 weeks, I didn't make myself sick. And it just was like, and it's such a like green, vibrant, beautiful place. It's we were on one of the Grenadine islands called Beckway. It's tiny. And it just felt, I don't know if it was healing, I don't know what it was, but I didn't do it. And so it really was like this light bulb moment where it's like, well, if I didn't do that for 2 weeks there, I could not do it when I come home. I guess there's more triggers at home. But it definitely was a way of like, I miss my mum, I ate food. I miss my sister, I ate food. When my sister was ill, which was 6.5 years, I'd go and be with her at hospital and be all happy and smiley, and then, come home, be bawling my eyes out and just eating food to try and, so I think I get it, like that was a definite addiction. And also sex for me as well. I was using I don't think in the traditional term of being a sex addict. I was using it to, for want of a better term, to fill a hole or a void or like a missing part of me. And just to feel like I wasn't on my own, like not to feel alone. So I think food definitely and sex were those things for me. But in that time, I was only indulgent in the moments where I was emotional. The rest of the time, I'd be so strict. So there was a time in my life, because I before the bulimia, I just didn't eat anything as well. So I'd go through points of like starving myself, and like the only things that were acceptable for me to eat would be like chicken breast and grapes. Like that would be it. So I couldn't eat anything else. And if I did, I'd freak out. So it was really restrictive as well. Like, and even at the point when I went vegan, I was doing, I was in the gym a lot at that time. I think I was probably 31 at that point. And so I was eating like quite a strict, like high protein, very lean diet. and then having the occasional like binge, but not making myself sick. And so when the vegan thing happened, my diet completely shifted, and vegan diet is full of carbs because even the protein is wrapped in like little, starchy, carby balls. And so I put on like a stone, but I think like a lot of acceptance for me around like my body and life. I had a preventive double mastectomy because of the BRCA gene mutation, which is a cancer.
Was that recommended or was that something that you... Okay, yeah.
Because my mum and sister both died and young, it was recommended as a preventative measure. So I had that and a reconstruction, and it completely changed the way that I saw my body, the way that I viewed myself as a woman, the pressure that I'd put on myself, like everything completely changed at that point. And I just felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders and I felt a lot freer. And so that definitely changed like my relationship with my body, my need to kind of strive for being in control of like how my body looks. And so, so now the last couple of months, like I said, I haven't had sugar and I've really cut down on like processed vegan food. I haven't really had much bread, or apart from the McDonald's that I just today, the McPlant. So I've kind of like really, like pulled things back. And again, that's been really interesting because I notice the moments where I would have used food. I notice that I feel really emotional, and what my body wants or what my mind wants to do is go and get something to eat to make me feel better, but I'm just not doing that. So I'm kind of sitting with what's actually there, and that's been a really interesting like process to know that I can do that.
So I'll share a quick story with you in terms of sobriety. You talked about sort of like a little bit then about like, I guess you're in control when you're sober, aren't you? And there's a lot of women when under the influence of alcohol are obviously vulnerable to predators. That's a better word rather than perpetrators. Predators. There was a moment on the tube yesterday when we were sat on it, and I was sat next to these two women, and then when one of them was getting off, the other woman said to her, "Be careful." And I don't know why, but it was a moment where I just thought, "Wow!" Like I never leave my friend and say, "Be careful." Like it's one of the last things I'd think of. If I'm leaving him somewhere, the last thing I'd say is be careful. And it was just a thought that sat with me, and I was kind of stewing on it for a little while. That how shit it is as a woman getting off a tube. That one of the things that they have to be mindful of is being careful, and that ain't just London in particular. This is everywhere. Talk to me a little bit about that in terms of sobriety. Is there a responsibility from you to look after your friends who are under the influence?
Yeah,
do you have to take on that role? I just think it was just something that when I heard it, I thought, that is shit.
Yeah.
How awful that we're living in a world where someone has to tell their friend, be careful.
I think if you're a woman, you know that it's message me when you get home, let me know as soon as you're home, like be careful. I say that to my friends all the time, whenever I leave them, message me as soon as you get home, let me know you're home. And we, I think that's just accepted in, as part of our experience that we have to think about those things. And even where we're like recording the podcast today, sometimes I'll park near the station if I'm, going into town in the evening and walk back to my car. And it probably past 11 o'clock, I would never do that. But my friend and I, who I live with, we've had a discussion because that's where she's shown me where to park. And I said to her about, when you walk back there, don't you ever feel, scared? She's like, I always jangle my keys, like walk with my keys. And, we have these kind of discussions about, what happens if or what happens, because it's part of our reality. And it's something that even I remember when I was little, and you would kind of hear the stories of young girls who were going missing or showing up murdered or whatever, that's a fear that you kind of live with. And as you get older, when we're talking about, perpetrators or predators, it starts to be your friendship circle. It starts to be people who have experienced sexual assault, who have experienced rape, and it becomes very much like part of your reality. And I think that with me, my friends, we won't go home without each other. Like I am that person, whether I'm drunk or not. We're in it to the end. And so I think as girls, I hope, or women, I hope you have that group of friends who are going to kind of look out for you. And, it's not, obviously, we know it's not like all men. We know that it's, that it's not everybody. But It is some, because the kind of percentage rates of people that have experienced, sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape are sky high. So someone has to be doing it,
Do you know what? There was a comment I saw not so long ago, and it was not all men, but always a man.
Yeah.
And I was like, geez.
Yeah.
Do you know, I think maybe I'm just more conscious of this since having a daughter. Do you know, she's almost 2 years old, and maybe, do you know, when I talk about catastrophizing and overthinking things, there she is just toddling around the house, and I'm thinking, what sort of dangers do I need to protect you from? Because there's two things in terms of, like, I think with from my wife mothering, there's a nurture, and it's sort of a togetherness.
Yeah.
As a dad, I think there's a nurturing, but there's also a face this way as well. This is the world. This is how dangerous it can be. And I think it's just, when there was that moment on the tube yesterday, I thought, I'm going to have to teach these things to this little girl one day, because that is the reality of the world out there. And I think it's just, maybe that's why I'm more conscious of it than, not that I was, disregarding it ever before, but as a dad now, I think you're overthinking these things and these possibilities, and what if they experience this, and God, touch wood and heavens forbid they ever do, but what if they experience these sort of things? How do you navigate that? And just how awful it is, I suppose, for women in general, and these were two women on the tube that was completely sober. It was only about 9:30, I think, last night. But that's the reality.
It is the reality. And I think that, being a parent is teaching your child to be confident, to be empowered, to make sensible decisions. And we're not always going to make sensible decisions. We're human, and we want to live life, and we want to have fun, and we don't want to be, we want to be free to a sense, as free as we can in the world that we live in. But I think that, it's really about giving people the kind of like tools to just make the right decisions, and to understand that sometimes they won't make the right decisions, but that's okay too. You're and that you have that support system, so that if, anything, God forbid, does go wrong, that you've got that support system. But you can't always protect people. You just give them the tools so that they can, kind of protect themselves and look after themselves and make those right decisions. And look, I went traveling as a woman for 10 months in South America, and I didn't once feel unsafe. Like, honestly, I didn't. Okay, I made decisions that, were, I guess, sensible. And I listened to what people told me about the areas that I was in. But I did bus journeys on my own, all sorts of things on my own. And for the most part, I felt really, really, safe. And so I think the world essentially is a good place, and we have to remember that to counterbalance it. But unfortunately, as women, I think until, all men acknowledge that, that women aren't just theirs for the taking, and, kind of have a respect for women, and, maybe deal with their stuff that makes them not, that's something that we as women have to do. And it's not fair. It's really not fair. And I've had this discussion quite a lot with guys, because I think a lot of men don't realise at all. Like, they've never had to consider it. They've never had to think about it. It's not part of their experience.
No, definitely not part of the day-to-day experience as well,
And I think as a white person, it's not the same, but listening to, my black friends about their experience of what it's like to live in this world, being black, I'm never going to know what that experience is like. But I can listen to them and take on board everything that they say, so that I'm aware of what their experience is like. So I'm not denying it. Whereas I think, there are some men who want to be like, no, it's not that bad. It's not this, it's not that. But that fear is, it's really real. And you'll be like walking, then there's someone behind you, and you're kind of like, shit. Do I need to cross the road? What do I do? And you kind of go into that fear state. But yeah, I think I have bbeen raped before, and it was like a date rape situation, which I've spoken about before. But I was out, and I was like in my early 20s, and it was someone that I knew. And I think this is the situation as well. Like, a lot of the assumption is that women who experience rape, it's strangers. Like, it's strangers on the street, it's people they've never met. But I think the statistic is 5 out of 6, I think that's right, or 4 out of 5 it's someone you know. It's someone that you know and trust. So, and that's the statistic. And so I think, even experiencing that's not going to make me scared of the world. Like, even that happening, I think doesn't make me fearful to go out and do things. But again, I've had to deal with it and I've had to process it and I've had to experience it, because I feel like if you repress things and hold on to things, that's when they become a problem. Because then you're always trying to keep it down, keep it down, keep it down. And it's with you the whole entire time. But yeah, so I think the reality is really there for me. And then I've had conversations with my friendship group, and I don't have like a group of friends. I have like loads of different friends who are all part of different groups.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And then within that group, there's like, I was kind of asking people at one point, there's one person who hasn't experienced like rape or sexual assault. And I'm just like, it's wild. It's actually wild.
Statistically.
And that's just in my, in my kind of group of friends. The more I open up about it, the more people are like, yeah, this happened to me, or someone did this to me, or that. And like, how are you okay? Or how have you managed to, because a lot of women as well, the shame that's attached to it, there's all these kind of like misogyny grifters who will say, it's a woman's responsibility not to get raped. She has to take, accountability for the part that she played in it by, being drunk or wearing the wrong outfit or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I just think, what a load of actual rubbish, like what, so we're supposed to be perfect humans, never make a mistake, dress in a certain way to try and stop, some men from, and that's a nuts concept to me. No, men should be brought up to respect women. Like, that's it.
Rapists, this is the thing I saw before. A woman had shared her story of when she was raped, and she actually showed what she was wearing the night she was raped, and it was very modest.
Yeah.
And they had, basically their argument was, it's never about the dress you wear, it's never about how much you drink, it's never about all these existing factors. Rape is because of rapists.
Yeah.
And that's what she was saying in terms of what she was wearing, because I love what the word you used then, misogyny grifters. And I'm actually going to come on to that actually, because for you as an influencer, you're not a parent, am I correct? No. So one of the things that I found interesting in terms of like a social media trend at the moment was women who haven't had children sharing stories about how much they're sort of enjoying their life. Like, I'm 40, and then it shows like a little bit of a trend of things that they're doing. It could be traveling. Yeah. It could be how they're just living their life to the full. And without fail, if I think I know what comments on this before I even click on the comment box, and it's all about time's ticking. You'll regret not having children, and there's all these sort of, I guess, just harsh comments. So for someone who is, living as a social media influencer, you kind of have to just accept that these comments are going to be coming your way. Yeah. How do you deal with it? Like, I've got so many questions about him. I've never really spoke to like an influencer before, so I've got so many questions just about the entire lifestyle. But I guess the comments is the first thing. How do you deal with such negative energy coming your way? I mean, I don't know if your comment section is negative, by the way.
That's exactly what my comment.
Oh, really? Oh, nice. Well, see, look at that. Nailed it.
No, what I will say is the majority of it is really positive, and that comes from like lots of women and some men as well who are there. Being like, it's none of anyone else's business. Like, live your life, do what you're doing. And the reason that it started is that I realised that my life was a little bit alternative or different to, everybody else's. But there's still a lot of people who are living a life similar to mine or who could possibly relate to my life. And I just made a reel that was like, I think at the time I was 38, like 38, single. I think at the time I said childless and happy. And I like people, you're not happy, you're lying, you're a danger to other women, you're lying to other women, you haven't fulfilled your only purpose of existing on the planet, you're a leftover woman.
One of my favourites is, why do childless people always feel like they want to tell us how happy they are that they're childless? Is it because they're in denial or something?
Yeah. So I'm in denial, all of that. I've changed it to child-free. And what I will say is I'm not necessarily child-free by choice. And I'm not saying that I would never like to have children or like to have a family, because I would. However, I don't think I was sure or certain of that until the last 2 years of my life. Okay. Because up until that, my life was super messy and I didn't really see a particular like future for myself. Don't think I'd ever given myself that. So, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, I will find a way to deal with it, because that's life. And I'm not I think my outlook is, like, having lost my mum and my sister, I'm here. Like, if you think that I'm going to spend, my life being miserable because of, something that I don't have control over, you can forget about it. I think, ideally, I would love to have a child with a partner who is loving and supportive and kind, so that I'm not doing all of the work myself, because I have loads of people in my life who are single parents and they do a fantastic job, but it is hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And I'm not in denial of that fact either. It's hard when there's two of you, let alone when there's just one of you. And so, if you haven't met that person, what do you do? And the reality, then people, well, there's something wrong with you if you haven't met that person. No, let's be honest about this. There's 8 billion people on this planet. The idea that all of us are going to meet the right person at the right time to do this is a load of fucking rubbish. And so many, even some of my friends are in relationships that are not ideal, that actually I wouldn't want to be in that relationship. They're making it work. That's entirely up to them. But that's not for me. I don't want that for myself. I haven't worked this hard to, create a life that I enjoy, that is happy, that's fun, to then be with someone that makes it worse. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, I think relationships can be brilliant and beautiful and challenging, and, they are really a learning ground, and, it is about compromise, and I'm not naive and stupid. However, I just haven't met the person that I can have that with yet. And I think that's okay. It's how it is, so it's really, for me, about reassuring, other people, not just women, but like men as well. That doesn't mean that you're never going to meet that person. And, it's also the other thing that people like to say when you don't have kids, well, who's going to look after you when you get old? Like, if you're having a kid to be your caretaker, piss off.
The one thing, do you know what? My dad says something similar to me before. He said, if he ever ends up in a care home, or if he ever ends up really ill, he's only like 56, I think. My dad, he had me quite young, too. I think he was about 23 when they had me. But yeah, he said, if he ever gets older and he needs care, he said, I just want you to know, I am not your responsibility. Do you know what I mean? I haven't brought you into this life
to look after me.
That's that's the last thing I want.
And it's also just wait. You think it's all right now, but just wait until you're 50, till you're like 70 and you're on your own in a home surrounded by cats. And I'm like, first of all, I like cats, so that's not a problem. And number 2, like, I remember, so my nan and granddad were both 92 and they died 6 weeks apart. My granddad would joke all the time about how he was taking his harem of women out, because so many of their friends, the man died first and the women were left on their own for years and years and years. Just because you're married or you have a partner now doesn't mean that you're going to until the day that you die.
Exactly.
And, I think being able to be okay on your own and enjoy your own company and to be self-sufficient is really great, because then, if later down the line, you might get a partner, you have a really happy relationship, and then you end up on your own again, you know how to do life. Like, it's okay. And I don't know what everyone's fascination is, or why it seems that some men in the comments, because I haven't had comments like that from women. I don't think ever. The hundreds and thousands of comments that I've had about it, I don't think any negative ones have been from women. It's always from men. And I feel like that it can be quite triggering. I think that society is changing. I think that, women are changing because we have choice. It's only like in the 70s and 80s that the laws were finally changed for women to be financially independent. Before, we needed a male signature to open a bank account, to get a mortgage, to get a business loan. I think the last one was in the 80s, was the business loan, like to have a cosign from a man. So, we have our independence. We can make choices. And people are always like, well, in our grandparents, age, like my grandparents were 92 and they've been together that whole time since they were in their 20s. But had they existed in a world where, there was more choice for women, I don't know if they would have been. They went through horrible times. They went through, really miserable, unhappy times, as well as great ones. And was that a good thing? Like, was it a good thing that women had to stay in a relationship because they couldn't survive without a man? They couldn't rent a house, they couldn't own a house, they couldn't get a job. Is that good? And you've got all of these kind of men around as well, misogyny grifters, who are selling this story that men we've got to be providers, and you've got to drive a Bugatti, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that.
And like Andrew Tate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and you don't have emotions. Depression isn't real. Like all of these different things. And I think, what a load of bollocks, number one. And number 2, I think that's what, like, I'm not saying all women, because I can't speak for all women, but for me personally, that's what I want. Like, that to me, someone who's, emotionally available, somebody who can communicate their feelings, somebody who, yes, like, strength is a really kind of like objective thing, isn't it? Because, I heard someone say that, men are, stronger than women. And then the kind of response to that is, well, yeah, if you take strength as
physical strength,
actual physical strength, but if you take it as the ability to deal with pain, physical pain, women would be stronger, right? Because the pain that we go through. But as women, we've been allowed this. Like, we've been allowed this from childhood. We're allowed to cry. We're allowed to talk about our feelings within our friendship groups. That's what we do. We have like really deep conversations. I can cry in front of my friends. I can get hugs from my friends. I wasn't always like that because I grew up in a household where we didn't communicate at all. But that's a freedom. Like, that's a luxury that isn't afforded to a lot of men. And how, like, I can't imagine having to hold on to all of the stuff that I've had to deal with, and probably not ending up drinking, doing drugs, doing something.
As a coping mechanism for all those things.
Because it's heavy. Life is heavy. Life is hard for all of us. And I think no one's got their shit together. It doesn't matter how good their life looks, how old they are, whatever is going on. No one's got their shit together, because life can be up here, then it can be back down there. It can be up here, it can be back down there. That's life for all of us. No one gets to escape without going on the roller coaster. And I just wish that, that men would do that more, that would have those conversations, would learn how to communicate. Because I was talking about this recently with someone, and it's like, if you've never learned how to have a conversation about how you feel, it must feel so fucking scary. What are the words that you use? How do you initiate a conversation like that if you've never done it before? You probably build it up in your head so much. What could I lose if I open up and say this? Like, what could go wrong? How are people going to perceive me? Is it going to completely change the way that, that they look at me? And that's so much. No wonder that, a lot of guys don't want to do that at all. But if they don't, then, you're kind of like, what happens is, especially if you're in a relationship, I think that I'm over here craving for someone to do that. And you're over here, having to build up a wall to hold on to whatever it is and make that wall thicker and bigger and stronger and harder. And, you've got one person who really wants that connection and the other person who wants it, but is so fearful that they kind of turn away from it. And it ends up being a really, negative situation to be in. And yeah, I think that it's not about softness or people being weak. It takes fucking courage to be vulnerable. It takes balls to be vulnerable, for want of a better word, or a big vulva, or whatever you want to say. But, it's not easy. Yeah. And so I think that, that is what is needed from men, is for them to be given space to be vulnerable and to be themselves and to be fucking human.
And that's what I'm trying to navigate at the moment, is balance of these things, of being the man, of being vulnerable when I need to be, and being open when I need to be as well.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you take stepping up as like doing physical shit, like I've got to get this done. But also stepping up could be learning to communicate better, learning to, express my feelings. That's also stepping up, because you want your daughter to grow up with, a role model of a man who knows how to communicate, so that she also finds herself in a relationship later on. Because when we look at, how our parents love, that tends to be, what we go out into the world and looking for, really. So I think it's really important, to kind of be that role model. But no one can get it 100% right. No one can, and it's okay to keep learning. I think, God, if we weren't learning our whole entire lives, and I think that's something that, I went into therapy thinking, cool, I'm going to get to a point where I'm like healed and it's going to be great. Whereas now I'm like, no, that doesn't exist. There's always going to be stuff. There's always going to be more stuff. There's always going to be things to deal with, to process, to, that's it's part and parcel of life, but that's growth. That's how we get, become better humans, I think, personally. Not by, amassing a load of material shit that doesn't really mean anything. Yeah. Loads of people have done that and then gone, fuck, I'm really unhappy. Who even am I? What does all of this stuff mean? Loads of people. So actually, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Do it if you want to do it.
That's what you want to do, yeah.
Don't neglect your personal development. And I think, the kind of idea of always having to be there for other people also means you need a support system in your life, And when we look at male suicide rates, they're through the fucking roof. And, I think a lot of that is feel like I've got to be the provider in a world right now where the economic state of things is a fucking mess and it's difficult for anybody. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, I can't cope, I don't know how to do it. So there's so much pressure. Like, how do we relieve that pressure? And, it might not always be talking to your wife. And I think this is the thing with like women is, it might be talking to my partner about it, or it might be talking to my group of friends about it, or one of my amazing friendship group who, in the last year, my ex-boyfriend, who I was still friendly with, died, and I was there for the last 12 days of his life. And then when he passed away, I had a miscarriage this year. So it's been a tough year for me. But my friendship group have been the biggest support system that I've ever experienced in my life. I cannot be, grateful and thankful enough for them. I don't think, that I would still be here really if it wasn't for certainly some of my best friends that I've had for the longest time. And today's would be my sister's birthday.
Oh, Jesus.
So, and even this morning I was just woke up feeling really kind of, emotional and etc. And my best friend messaged me straight away. I haven't heard from my dad, I haven't heard from my brother, because they'll just forget, it's not in their kind of field of vision. But my best friend will never forget. And so I think it's developing those support networks. Where are they for you? It doesn't always have to be your partner, and maybe it's a friendship that you create with someone at work. Maybe it's a friendship with one of your friends from your friendship group where you can have those conversations, and you start there, and then you start to kind of, bring other people into it. But I think it's really important that you as a person, as a human, feel like you have that support and you have those people in your life. Because we all deserve that. Yeah. We're all deserving of love and care and support. Whoever we are, whatever we've experienced, we are just by being here. And they're innate human things, And I think that this society teaches men that they're not for you. But you're but I feel them, but they're not for you. So that's difficult thing.
The OnlyFans culture on social media. You talk about misogyny, grifting and stuff like that. For me, I'll be scrolling through and every, 10 videos or something, there'll be something, sexual. And instantly, if you click on that person's profile, there's a link tree and there's an OnlyFans. It's always the case. What I always found interesting is, again, the misogyny, grifting of fatherless behaviour. Your father failed you. And it's one of the things of, I guess, in this era of the female empowerment and taking ownership of your own body. All these men that are commenting this, I guarantee, will watch porn. Yeah,
they're the ones that are making a business.
So what's your opinions on these sort of conflicting things, really, and I guess the industry itself?
I think the reason that the industry exists is because we live in a patriarchy, right? It's the whole point is that it's there for that reason. It wouldn't exist if we didn't have the sexualization of women's bodies. And it always annoys me when people will be like, well, yeah, but boobs are reproductive organs, or that. You can go to places in the world where women live topless and the men in that culture aren't like this the whole time. Because it's normal to them, and they're not sexualized. Their ways of feeding babies, etc. Some of my friends have been told off by men for breastfeeding in public. Put that way, it's disgusting, because you only want to think of boobs in a sexual manner. So I just think, look, we live in the time that we live in, and women are doing whatever they want to do, and that's absolutely fine. I think for me, personally, I have a series called In Bed with Claira, which is where I do an interview series in a bed. And I also have a podcast with my friend called Things I Wish My Mum Had Told Me, which was born out of an In Bed with Claira episode with my friend Emma, who's at Tamsin Hill. And it was, I just wanted to be able to talk about not sensationalized sex, not, anything mad, graphic or wild or crazy or whatever, but that normal people, especially, women, we have sex, we're allowed to talk about it. When you get sex education at school as a woman, all you're taught about is not to get pregnant. That don't get pregnant. That's all you're taught about. You're not taught about pleasure. You're not taught about how to enjoy sex. And, I think for the majority of us, we grow up thinking that our role is to, make sure that the man has a good time. When I speak to not just my friendship group, but, when we do the podcast, we'll ask people questions and get the questions in. A lot of women will have been having sex for 10, 15 years sometimes before they've had a partnered orgasm, because they're not prioritizing their pleasure because they don't even know how to. It's the statistic is 65% of women admit to faking an orgasm. I think it's probably much higher. There's a mad statistic about the amount of women who are dissatisfied with their sex life. And so I think that, for me, it was really important to start having these conversations. There's the orgasm gap, where it's wild that I think in partnered sex, it's 90, heterosexual sex, 95% of the time men are having orgasms. And for women, it's way down in, I think it's 40% or something like that. So, it's something that needs to be discussed, and our pleasure is important. And there's no reason why, as adult people, we can't discuss sex. Let's be honest, the majority of all adults at some point in their life will have sex. So why can't we talk about it?
Why is it such a taboo subject?
Why is it
sort
so
of thing,
shameful and, kind of this thing, especially as women, you can't do it because don't forget, if you've slept with, if your body count's higher than 3, then you're not wifey material. If you've done all of this absolute rubbish, and I just think I don't want to carry the weight of any of that shame, embarrassment, which I had and have felt in my life. And so that's why I wanted to, create places where it was safe to have those conversations. And we do have male listeners, and we do have, people that watch and are like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And I think that's the main thing. And so many women who are just like, oh my God, thank you said that. And that's what it's for. That's what I wanted, things to be different. I wanted the conversation to be natural. And also, sex can be embarrassing. It can be funny. We've all had embarrassing, funny situations happen to us. It's okay. That's part and parcel of it. We have a human body, we can't control all the facets of it all the time. So, I think it became really important to me, as I've got kind of older, to just free it up, free up the conversation, be really honest about myself and my experiences, and to just let go of the shame that I might have felt from, some of the stigma and growing up hearing certain rhetoric, because I just wanted it to be over.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Before we finish, I've got a series of 10 quick-fire questions that I ask all of our participants. So
if I don't get them wrong.
Well, you can't get them wrong. So, what is your favourite word?
The first word that came to my head was cunt.
There you go. Perfect. What's your least favourite word?
My least favourite word? I don't think I've got one. I like language. I like words. Moist, probably.
Moist,
I think
yeah.
is one
That's
of those ones
a lot of people dislike moist. It depends on the context, doesn't
it?
They always say if it's a cake, it's okay. Any other time, it's not.
It's quite visceral, isn't it?
Yeah,
moist.
visceral, yeah. Like that. Tell me what turns you on, either creatively, spiritually, or emotionally.
I think just the vision of being able to make other people feel good. And freer, and what I don't mean just that kind of
yeah, I feel good temporarily sort of thing.
Yeah.
What turns you off?
Andrew Tate. No, misogyny, grifters, and people who just don't listen, that are shut down and this is it.
That's my favourite word, misogyny. It's the one thing I can really take away from today, where I can identify things down and go, misogyny, grifter. Favourite curse word? Is it still cunt or?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah. What sound or noise do you love?
Bleh.
Sound or noise do you hate?
God. I think, people that've got really, really loud cars, and they go, I hate that.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Therapist.
What profession would you not like to do?
Footballer.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, fuck, it's you.
Thank you, Claira. You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And if you've enjoyed this episode of the Believe in People podcast, then please check out our other episodes and hit that subscribe button. You can also find clips, outtakes and extras from this series on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and YouTube at CGL Hull. That's at CGLHULL. We're on Apple Music, Spotify, Google and YouTube Music, so please like and subscribe to be notified about new episodes. You can also search for Believe in People podcast on your favourite listening device, and if you can leave us a review, that will really help us in getting our message out there and rising up the daily podcast charts.